What if the real reason poverty persists is not because we don't start strong, but because we don't sustain what works? Good morning, and welcome to Disrupting Poverty Through Leadership That Delivers Results AM Talk Show. I'm your host, Dr. Tekemia Dorsey, and today we're taking this conversation even further. Because starting initiatives is easy. Sustaining impact, that's leadership. Today's episode is titled Sustaining Systems for Poverty Disruption from Commitment to Continuity. Agenda 23 in Action. Across organizations, cities, and systems, we see a pattern. Strong launches, initial funding, early momentum. And then decline, disconnection, disappearance of impact. Now, let's connect this to Agenda 2030. The Sustainable Development Goals were never designed for short term wins, they were designed to sustain long term transformation. So, the real question is, how do leaders build systems that don't just start change, but sustain it? A lot of thinking for so early in the morning, huh? Let's begin by understanding why sustainability fails, even when intentions are strong. Let's ground this in reality. A workforce initiative launched with strong funding and community excitement. Whoop, 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 whoop. Year one, high engagement, off to a great start. Year two, reduce participation. What went wrong? Year three, program ended. Why, you ask? Great question. No long term funding strategy, no system integration, no over ownership beyond initial leaders. Sounds familiar? Because the truth is, programs fail when they are not built into systems. Not programs, not silos, but systems. Agenda 23 reminds us, especially through SDG 1, which is no poverty, and SDG 8, decent work. And SDG is Sustainable Development Goals. And again, this is strictly pulled from Agenda 2030 because sustainability is not optional, it is required. So if programs are temporary, systems must remain the focus. Sustainable leadership shifts from programs to infrastructure, solid base, strong foundation. A city transitioned from offering job training programs to embedding workforce pipelines into school systems, employer partnerships, policy frameworks. That in itself is already a great win win in theory, because in practical application, the results should The results remain. Even when funding shifted, opportunity remained. Because when you're moving from just a silo program to a system in itself that continues to build and to grow, that's the sustainability that the world needs. And so systems continue when programs end. So are you operating with a system right now or still with programs? Leaders must ask themselves, or the big question, is this initiative dependent or is it embedded? Is it a program or is it a system? Don't know the difference? It's okay. You still have time to figure that part out. And if you're not quite sure how to do it by yourself, be sure to reach out to see how someone can help. But when systems don't sustain themselves, leadership must design for continuity. That's the role for leaders and not managers. Leaders, listen. Sustainability must be intentional in your program, organization, community engagement work. It doesn't matter. Sustainability must be intentional. What does that include, Dr. Dorsey? Great question. Sustainability means multi year funding strategies, which is already hard in itself, but doable. Cross sector ownership, even harder, but absolutely integratable. Policy alignment, yep, it's going to stretch you outside of your norm, but needed. Leadership succession planning. If something happens to you, who's going to step in? Training the next generation or the person behind you or several to be ready to take over if something happens. So, what does sustainability means when you are intentionally building for success? Multi-year funding strategies, cross-sector ownership, policy alignment, and leadership succession planning. An organization align its strategy to SDG 4, which is quality education, and SDG 10, reduce inequalities. Instead of relying on one leader, they built a shared leadership structure, win-win, documented process, win-win, aka data, and community partnerships, huge wins. Because when leadership change, the system remains. So if you're sharing the leadership, your documented processes through data, and the community partnerships are already in place, the next leader coming through the door don't have to rebuild it. All they're doing is stepping into a pipeline, a system and infrastructure that's already in place, and their biggest challenge is making it their own. Because when sustainability is built, they're no longer hoping for success. It is there for the taking. In sustainability, without measurement cannot be maintained. If there's nothing in place, if there's no pipeline, if there's no infrastructure, if there's no shared leadership, if there's no documenting processes, if there's no community partnership, you can't really measure what's working and what's not. And unfortunately, oftentimes, people, individuals, organizations, programs will have to start from the ground up once again. Short term metrics don't sustain long term change. Therefore, leaders must track, 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 track. Leaders must track multi-year economic mobility. What was year 1 like? How do you expand or add year 2? Who's in the pipeline for year 3? That means if you are tracking multi-year economic mobility, you must have a pipeline of a system pipeline in place. A one-off is not going to do it. Okay. So Leaders must track multi-year economic mobility, which means that you have to have a strong infrastructure. Leaders must also track wage progression over time. Employee year one, are they being paid the same year five? If so, why? And what are the industry trends at that point? Because especially now that we are even more in a digital AI world, requirements are going to change. Prices are going up. So should wages. Leaders must also track generational impact indicators, as well as reduction in systemic barriers, which is a whole nother area in itself. Let me share an initiative that recently shifted from annual reporting to a 5-year outcome tracking, aligned themselves with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is again aligned with Agenda 2030. The insight as to why they shift their initiatives from annual reporting to the 5-year outcome tracking, because some strategies look successful short term but fail long term. Again, where you're starting to where you're going and measuring in between. And what we don't realize, because it's not often stated, is that time reveals truth. If you're only looking at the short term return on investment, it's not much to go off. If you're looking at the short term compared to the long term, then you can tell what's working, what's not, and where improvements are needed. Now, let's talk about one of the most overlooked elements: community continuity. Whew, it's a lot to unpack first thing in the morning, but it's necessary. Sustainability increases when communities are not just participants, but owners. A community led initiative continued even after external funded ended. How is that, Dr. Dorsey? Simple. Because the residents were involved. They had leadership roles, they had decision making power, and they had ownership of outcomes. Now, as a leader, having community led initiative as a part of your growth strategy plan is not a weakness. It is an absolutely necessity. Now, there are pros and there are cons that can be weighed. The pros are you're successful and everyone buys into your vision. The downside is if things don't aren't going right, you might have people more unhappy with you than they are happy. Well, let me tell you this. Sidebar. Whether the community believes in you or not, as a leader, it's easy to step into a role. It's hard to maintain that role because not everyone is going to agree with you. Some people are going to throw you side looks, sidebars, whatever, because they think you're the worst person ever. But as long as you have good intention, you are more than built for it strong. The good with the bad is going to make you a better person over time and those that you are charged to serve with. So, again, community led initiatives continue after external funding ending because residents have roles that they feel empowered. Put them in leadership roles that really speak to their interest, their passion, and why they want to get involved, right? They create buy-in because they have input, not just beyond hearsay, but decisions that are being made, especially those that directly impact them. And then they are the ownership of whether things work positively or not. As a leader, yes, you are the visionary, but it's also going to have shared responsibility. And that ownership, which is a part of it, also falls on the community because external support started the work, but community ownership sustains it. And that is how we break and disrupt the cycle of poverty through leadership. If the community cannot carry it, it will not last because there is no eternity for anyone. So eventually, we're going to have to hand it off, right? And finally, let's connect sustainability back to global responsibility, right? Agenda 2030 is built on one principle: long term, sustained impact across systems. Let me say it again. Agenda 2030 is built on one principle: long term, sustained impact across systems. The SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, are not meant to be quick wins. Not at all. They are decade-long commitments. Decades, centuries, commitments. Leaders who align with Agenda 2030 think beyond immediate results, because they're not thinking just short term, they're thinking long term, right? They build systems for continuity, and they measure impact over time. Sustainability is not a phase, it is an absolute goal. And it should be your goal as well, whether you're leading an organization, leading an initiative, leading your household, doesn't matter. It should be your goal as well. Now, let's bring this into action because you know I love throwing out a challenge, right? So, here's your leadership challenge: identify one initiative in your organization, whether you're leading 10,000, 100, or 10, that is not built for long term sustainability. Identify one initiative in your organization that is not built for long term sustainability. Then, once you have identified that one initiative, then redesign that one element to embed into a system. Then commit to measuring impact beyond 1 year. Yes, I will repeat it again, no problem. Your leadership challenge remains: identify one initiative in your organization that is not built for long-term sustainability. Then redesign that one element into a system. And then commit to measuring it beyond 1 year. Yes, leadership is work. And when we're looking for sustainability over time, that requires thinking outside the box and pushing the narrative. Because here's the truth: starting change is leadership, sustaining change is legacy. And leaders who build systems that last are the ones who truly disrupt poverty. Whew, that's it. Another exciting moment. So, if this episode challenged you to think long term, take the next step. Follow Disrupting Poverty Through Leadership That Delivers Results, AM Talk Show. Share one system you are building, not just a program, and tag a leader committed to sustainability, not just activity. Because disrupting poverty is not about what we start, it's about what we sustain. And sustainability is the future. Well, thank you for joining another wonderful, exciting, and mind blowing episode. If you have not heard or listened to the previous episodes, please go back and take a look. Join me for the next episode tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp. And until then, have a great day. It's a pleasure. And go and lead differently than what you did yesterday. I'm out.